Hello. Well, we have to talk about Richard, actually. Richard Kyles Cowie Jr., MBE, otherwise known as Wiley. Everyone in Britain knows what's been going on, but there will be people elsewhere who might not. So I'll just explain. Wiley is a grime artist who has opened a whole can of worms by spending 48 hours last week Instagramming and tweeting a whole stream, Facebooking too, I suppose. I'm not sure about that. A whole stream of messages that have contained some pretty awful anti Semitism, one after the other, as I said, in a constant stream. The can of worms it opened was that Twitter and Facebook and Instagram left these messages up, including one or two that were actually incitements to violent action against Jews. Now, nobody's actually said this, but if Twitter and Facebook can shut down someone like Tony Randall within hours, when he had not actually said anything beyond the simple truth, that is, that Muslim men were gang raping non-Muslim girls, it seems actually a bit rum that they couldn't decide to take Wiley offline for saying that all Jews deserve to be shot. So apparently Wiley had some sort of dispute with his manager, who's a Jewish man by the name of John Wolfe, and the head of a company called the A-List Management Company. So Wiley, having a dispute with one man who happens to be a Jew, then tweets out 48 hours of hatred against all Jews in general. That's clever. And this is the Wikipedia entry about Wiley. Richard Kyles Cowie Jr., born 1979, better known as Wiley, and in his early career, Wiley Cat. Grime MC, rapper, songwriter, DJ, and record producer from East London. He's considered a key figure in the creation of grime music and often labeled the godfather of grime. In the early 2000s, he independently released a series of highly influential Esky beat instrumentals on white label vinyl. It seems that he's a very creative and energetic man. Okay? But I think probably the most important thing to know about him is his attitude to himself. At one point in an interview, I'll find a clip and I'll put it up there, he says he's 41 and at the end of his career. I think, my feeling, he's just leaving the house and burning it down behind himself. Here's one of the tweets, right? There are two sets of people who nobody has really wanted to challenge, Jewish and KKK. But being in business for 20 years, you start to understand why rednecks are the KKK and Jewish people are the law. Work that out. He added, if you work for a company owned by two Jewish men and you challenge the Jewish community in any way, of course, you'll get fired. He says people don't challenge Jews. For God's sake, people are challenging Jews all the time. And I get stuff about Jews under my videos all the time. Some of it pretty bloody awful. And there was, as I recall, although I wasn't there at the time, one rather large challenge just a few years ago within the memories of my parents that ended up challenging 6 million of the Jewish population of Europe. It's complete nonsense. But judging from some of the things I've seen him tweet, it looks to me as if the man has, well, I don't know what, some sort of mental illness, which might, of course, be part of the reason why he had that row with the manager in the first place. He says here, as I said, if you work for a company owned by two Jewish men and you challenge the Jewish community in any way, of course you'll get fired. I mean, what's that supposed to prove? If someone worked for me and insulted me for being a woman, I'd fire him. I mean, it's total nonsense. But, well, it looks very much as if Wiley likes to pick fights, and that's all there is to it. When Stormzy produced something in collaboration with Ed Sheeran, Wiley tried to pick a fight with him. I've heard that Wiley has suffered 20 knife attacks, and here we have I'll get a photo, I'll put it there, of him sporting the scar from one of those attacks. And he apparently is got very sensitive about that scar on his face. And for a while after he got it, he wouldn't come out the house. Well, you wonder, don't you, how does anyone get 20 knife attacks? Is it just a tiny bit possible that he started some of the fights himself? There are plenty of grime and rap artists, never mind more mainstream singers, who didn't get any sort of knife attack, not even once. But there, I'm digressing. So a lot of Jewish artists and non-Jewish artists have expressed outrage that Twitter and Instagram and Facebook have been dragging their feet about taking down the offensive material. And what I object to is this. It didn't take them any time at all to take down Tony Randall's tweet account or his Facebook account. And if you look through Tony Randall's stuff, you wouldn't find anything like the level of vitriol and incitement to violence you can find in the Wiley excrescences. All Tony Randall said was that Muslim men were raping non-Muslim girls. Is that an unfounded accusation? I don't think so. But Wiley says Jews should be shot and that they're cowards. And I think there's a country called Israel which slightly disproves that. It has, I don't know, perhaps 8 million Jews in it, something like that. They choose to live there and they're surrounded by 100 million angry Arabs and a few more million angry Muslims who aren't their direct neighbours, and yet they keep up a civil society much better than all the Arab countries around them. They have schools and hospitals and elections and all that sort of stuff we take for granted round here. And they trot off to join the army for 3 years when they're 17 or 18 or something. I wouldn't call those guys cowards. So I reckon that's not exactly what I'd call any sort of a statement of truth. Oh, Wiley also says that Israel belongs to black people. So there's something for all those angry Arabs to be even angrier about. And here's another pearl of Wiley wisdom. The Arab control presence around Africa, and I don't like it. In fact, I know the setup. Europeans and Arabs have got Africa in a headlock. So everyone's to blame, aren't they? Yeah? As for my opinion about who should be thrown off Twitter and Facebook, I don't think either of them should have been thrown off. My red line is when Wiley called for the shooting of Jews. Yeah, that should have gone. But for the rest, he should have been allowed to make his rant as much as he wanted and let the entire world know what a total prat he is. And Tony Randall should be allowed to do the same. Except he doesn't rant. There's nothing at all I've seen that Tony Randall said that even comes into the same category as the vomitings of Richard Kilea Cowie Jr., aka Wiley. But of course, that's just my opinion. And as for my opinion about Wiley himself, well, I find his attitude to Jews illiterate, stupid, vile, and mad as a box of frogs. But actually, I'll leave criticism of that to others. What I'm going to talk about is his colossal ingratitude. Look, he has a row with his manager, and as soon as that guy displeases him, Wiley has a go at the manager's co-religionists, threatening them. Wiley's a very successful artist, which means his career must have been well managed. What's he doing accusing his manager of being a snake? That manager obviously made him a very wealthy man. So I reckon that what he's done is pretty ungrateful to his manager. However, I don't know anything about his relationship with John Woolf, but what I can talk about in reasonable security is his relationship with his mother country, which is Britain. 2 years ago, Wiley was given an MBE. Here's a picture of the medal. It's an honour given to people who have distinguished themselves in some way. In the case of Wiley, he got the MBE for services to British music. Here he is getting the award from Prince William, and here he is afterwards, looks pretty happy to me. When he got it, he said that it was a door opener to him, which would enable him to teach, because he said he wanted to pass his knowledge on to other people. And so it would have been. But now, after all of this, there's been talk of his MBE being taken away from him. Frankly, again, I don't think that should happen to anyone. You don't give someone a prize of some sort and then take it back just because you've fallen out. But again, well, that's another matter. Let's just talk about what Wiley said when the possibility of the MBE being revoked came up. He said that his MBE was framed and in the possession of his manager, so he never had it. Here we are. Sorry about that, it got lost behind a stack of other windows. The East London-born rapper received an MBE in 2018. He claims his former manager is in possession of his MBE and he would be willing to give it up as he never wanted it. Take it back. Listen to this I just told you. I never had an MBE, he said. John Woolf's got the MBE. It's framed in his house. Now, what was the MBE for, really? Don't think that I was sitting here like, where's my MBE? And the rapper went on to say, I never felt comfortable going to get it. Just look at Britain's colonialism. That's the wrong word. But Britain's colonialism history. Now that's ingratitude. He was brought up here. He took advantage of the British educational system. Not well enough by the looks of things. He took advantage of the British National Health Service, who stitched him up for his 20 knife wounds. He's taken advantage of British government honours. He's even taken advantage of British colonialism. Because frankly, if it hadn't been for British colonialism, he wouldn't have been brought up in the comparative comfort of South London, where he had the freedom to deal drugs and advance his music career. And he's earned a lot of money out of a British audience. So everyone's talking about his anti-Semitism, which is indeed awful. But frankly, that's not what I find the most objectionable. He says a whole lot of nasty, mad and downright fantastical things about Jews, and then he blames it on the country which has grown him and given him one of its highest honours. This is what he said: racism is racism, and you can't hide the fact that systemic racism exists, and it wasn't set up by us. He's talking about Britain, isn't he? Let's remember, he blames the Jews, he blames the Arabs, and he blames the British. No, I think, well, why has Wiley been stabbed 20 times? 20 times. Because obviously here's a man looking for a fight, looking for an excuse to fail, I think. Looking for a way to end his life somehow. And it doesn't have to be death, by the way. It could be just obscurity. He's not going to have much of a music career. Now he's pissed off his manager and probably terrified a lot of other managers as well. I mean, let's face it, if he got a manager who happened to be, let's say, an Irishman, How does that manager know that sooner or later Wiley's not going to turn on him and start blaming him for being an Irishman? Yeah, and Wiley isn't going to get much of a teaching job either, or a charity job. Not with this sort of background, anything at all. So all he's got left to do is to run off and live with his mum in Cyprus. He had to send his mum to Cyprus, by the way, so far as I've been able to find out, to get her away from his drug dealing enemies. So here's his excuse. What else can he do? Run to Cyprus and live there on his diminishing returns and blame the whole world for his failure and the mess he's made of his life. Well, that is until he gets involved in a knife fight with some Greek in a bar. I believe those guys are a bit handier with sharp blades than the so-called toughs we have here in Britain. They kill their own sheep there, so I've been told. Why don't you treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of promotional merchandising? The Grannyopteryx t-shirt or the Granbo mug, which comes in 2 flavours, with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. And whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.